Afternoon.
Thank you. Mrs. Talbot, when we left off before the break, we were on poll 000555212, and that was a letter from Jarnail Singh in relation to the case of Dahl, requesting certain information from you. That should be brought up on the screen. Thank you. Do you recall that letter? Yes.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I'm going to move on, but I'll come back to that particular topic shortly. But can we, before I do that, go to poll 001072242, and it's page 3. This is the 9th of December 2010, and an email from yourself to all, and it says, "Dear all, now that the Misra prosecution has concluded, we now have to pick up the civil Horizon cases to see whether or not we should be bringing proceedings in respect of them. Had civil cases been paused pending the decision in the Isme Misra case, or the judgment, so the verdict even in the Isme Misra case?"
I think some had, yes.
And looking down to a message to Dave, you say there, this was a chap who worked as a postmaster 2007 to 2008. This is about David Bristow, a sub-postmaster. He refuses to believe that he's done anything wrong and that it was the fault of Horizon which led him to be threatened with summary termination. He eventually resigned. And you say halfway through the next paragraph, he has jumped on the Postmasters for Justice bandwagon. I appreciate that the complete printout would be very expensive. Given your knowledge of Fujitsu, can you estimate what the cost would be, or suggest whether there's any other way of proving that the system was working correctly and that therefore the losses it showed were real losses? You seem there to be getting slightly tired of the bandwagon. Is that a fair summary of your mindset at that time?
Within civil litigation, I was beginning to feel frustrated. I think I've alluded to that in my statement, because Fujitsu and Paul were constantly assuring us that there was absolutely nothing wrong with the Horizon system. And yet, every time a matter was referred to civil litigation, and this would only have been a tiny proportion of sub-postmaster deficiency cases, the response was becoming regular, that the sub-postmasters were not at fault, it was Horizon. So we were frustrated because we've been given assurances there's nothing wrong on one side, and yet people are claiming there's something wrong on the other.
And you say that it would be expensive to get a complete printout. I mean, by that stage, were you having so many cases brought by sub-postmasters or so many complaints about Horizon being brought that you didn't want to waste money on it?
Pardon me. No, that's not what I mean at all. I'm not a commercial lawyer, but under the contract between Paul and Fujitsu, Fujitsu were only obliged to provide their services in analysing cases 100 times a year. Now, I'm not a prosecutor, but I did come to know that prosecution would, in their own investigations, utilise an awful lot of that 100 opportunities. Therefore, if you're dealing with a civil case and you want an analysis of data from Fujitsu, you would then have to go back to Paul the business and get them to authorise that they were prepared to pay for the same. So
So by
That's why I'm talking about cost in that particular extract.
at this stage, I mean, you've said that you were frustrated. It seems as though it seems all a bit of a bandwagon to you, and you don't want to go through the expense of having to get information from Fujitsu.
No. I was asking for Dave's opinion as to what he thought. I think this is probably Dave Talbot. What he thought Fujitsu would charge to obtain that information. I wasn't rejecting it at all. I wanted information.
By this stage, 2010, were you aware of, for example, the article in Computer Weekly? That was a 2009
I didn't read it personally, but I have seen additional disclosure making reference to it.
Can we move on to poll 000555894, please? When we just started after lunch, I took you back to that document where it was a request in the case of Dahl. That request was the 2nd of September 2010, and this is, I think, your response, dated the 16th of December 2010. Do you recall why it took such a long time to respond to Jarnail Singh?
I think it's because there was another exercise going on within legal services this time to try and reduce headcount. And during that process, I was informed there was no more role for me within legal services, and it is on that occasion that I moved over in the following January to Royal Mail Group, the business.
So by that stage, how small had the legal team within the post office become?
In terms of permanent members of staff, quite small, because a process had begun under which some of the regional agents, but certainly a lot of the London agents, would provide lawyers for a period of 6 to 9 months to come and work with the in-house team, ergo reducing the actual employee numbers.
I don't quite understand that.
Sorry. There was an exercise going on to reduce headcount within legal services.
Yes.
And I think as part of trying to fulfill obligations to our clients, in place of some of us who were going, a process began under which our external legal agents began to supply members of their firms to come and work within legal services for a period of time, I think a minimum of 6 months, sometimes longer.
So a secondment of some sort.
A secondment, that's what I was
So
trying
they
to...
were reducing the size of the legal team and replacing people who were experienced in dealing with these kinds of cases with external lawyers for a temporary period of time.
That's correct.
And you say in that response, I thought that your barrister on the case of Misra would have copies of everything which he considered to be relevant from the time he spent 2 days here. I only have email folders on Lotus Notes insofar as they can be retrieved and an Outlook, but you're welcome to come over and search them. There are numerous boxes in respect of Castleton, most of which are still with Stephen Dilley. Please, who can let you know how much it will cost to retrieve them from the storage facility. And then you say this, there are ongoing cases every month which raise the issue of Horizon, so it's a movable feast. I'm endeavouring to pull together a list of those cases currently with us where allegations have been made in respect of Horizon. Most of these cases have been on hold awaiting the decision in Misra. The transcript of that case is now being created and should be with us shortly. I mean, why was it that Misra was so significant to you at this time?
Misra was significant for the business. It was a criminal case, so logically, looking back, it shouldn't have had an impact on civil matters at all. I can only conclude that a decision was made that any embryonic sub-postmaster deficiency civil cases should be stayed pending that decision, pending the conclusion of the Misra case, sorry.
I'll go on to draw your attention to a number of other documents relating to the Isme Misra case. But before I do that, I mean, might it be the case that, like Lee Castleton, Isme Misra's case was being held out as an example to dissuade future claims?
It was a criminal prosecution, so I can't comment on that.
But the fact that cases seem to have been stayed on hold awaiting a decision on Misra sounds as though Misra would have been very significant for the Post Office.
I think it was significant to the Post Office, yes.
There are ongoing cases every month which raise the issue of Horizon. Was that not indicative of a wider problem with Horizon at that stage?
The Mr. Greening document that we referred to this morning, if that had begun to be implemented, would have required us to begin reporting on sub-postmaster cases. And there's a possibility that I might have be concerned about numbers arising out of that. But as I say, that document was created in the August of 2000. We're still only in the December of 2000. 2010, sorry. Probably hadn't got off the ground as yet.
We have quite serious criminal proceedings going on against Mr. Dahl and Miss Misra. Do you know whether they were told that there were ongoing cases every month which raise issues at Horizon?
I don't know.
By this time, 2010, you knew about the report in Cleveland's. You knew about the BDO report in the Castleton case. You knew about complaint after complaint about the Horizon system. So much so, it seems that cases were put on pause awaiting a decision in the Misra case. Was all that knowledge that you had relevant to the Misra case and what was to become a precedent? Did you feel any burden on yourself knowing that this significant case was taking place to provide information about your knowledge of the complaints that had been made about the Horizon system over the years?
I didn't see that as my role at the time. I think I assumed, and this is only a personal assumption, that criminal would have been aware, given their involvement with security, Fujitsu and Pol.
You've said that the criminal divisions and the civil divisions were strictly kept very much apart. You seem here to be a conduit for information in some ways to the criminal team. Did you see any responsibility on yourself to inform the criminal team about, for example, the Coyne report in the Cleveland's case, or the doubts that were raised during the Castleton case, or other complaints, civil complaints that you had received in relation to the functioning of Horizon?
I didn't.
Was there any process in place for drawing all of those civil strings together and providing that information to the criminal team?
No, there wasn't.
Can we look at poll 000555716? I think this is a letter here. Is this from you? Or I think if we look over the page, it's a letter from you to Guildford Crown Court. And if we go to page 1, you write to inquire whether the court would be prepared to authorise the release of the tapes of the hearing to arrange for them to be transcribed. We need the transcripts to us in other cases where Fujitsu and the Horizon system are challenged on similar facts. If the judge is prepared to release the tapes to us or the transcribers for this purpose, I would also want them to include details of the sentencing hearing. It does seem, to some extent, that you were a conduit for these criminal matters and gathering evidence to use against postmasters who were involved in civil claims.
I don't think I was a conduit for for criminal matters. I had other clients within the business, and I believe if I was a conduit for anybody, it was to provide information to them, parties such as Mr. Rod Isme and Mike Granville, who was head of regulatory relationships.
So
I can't now recall whether or not any order was made for Misra to pay over any money to Post Office Limited, so therefore it may be that part of the reason for me writing to Guildford County Crown Court was to obtain this documentation with a view to taking further civil proceedings, but
you're there writing to the Crown Court and you say, we need the transcript to us in other cases where Fujitsu and the Horizon system are challenged on similar facts. So it does seem like the Castleton case, that this was an important case for the Post Office to win, to dissuade others that were waiting in the wings.
this was a criminal case, and therefore I had very limited information about it. I know that I was asked to apply to the Guildford Crown Court for the transcript. For what use it was going to be put to, other than to be of benefit to Post Office Limited, I can't really comment.
And who asked you to do that?
I'm very sorry, but without access to my papers, I can't tell you.
You recall being asked to do it. It wasn't of your own volition, but you don't recall who asked you.
I would never have written a letter like the one on the screen at my own volition.
But you can't remember who asked you.
Not without additional disclosure.
I'm going to move on to a different topic, which is the awareness or involvement of the Post Office leadership and senior management. Can we please look at WITN 0400211, please? I'm going to start with Keith Baines, who was the contract manager with Fujitsu. So we're moving now far back in time, back to where we started today, the Wolstenholme case, the 4th of August 2004. Can you assist us with what involvement Keith Baines had in the Wolstenholme case and these cases more broadly?
I can only conclude from this that Keith Baines had access to a statement that would have been, in general form, useful in terms of creating a witness statement specific to the facts of the Cleverleys case.
Do you recall Keith Baines having been involved in the early development of the Horizon project?
I don't know anything about the early development of the Horizon project.
And did Keith Baines ever raise with you any concerns he had about the functioning or reliability of the Horizon system?
Never.
We've seen his name on a few documents today. What was his level of involvement generally in these civil proceedings against sub-postmasters?
I'm sorry, this is 2004. I dealt with thousands of managers over the 23 years I was working for Royal Mail Group. I can't recall his specific function.
Okay. I'll move on then to Rod Isme and others. Can we start by looking at poll 00107-426, please? Can we look at page 3 of this document? We have an email there from yourself to David Smith, Jennifer Robson, Tony Utting, Rod Isme, copied to certain people. And in this, you summarise the facts of the Castleton case. Can you recall why this distribution list was being used to summarise the facts of the Castleton case in 2005?
I believe that David Smith was the most senior officer on that list. Tony Utting was head of security. Rod Isme you've already heard of. Jennifer Robson, I think, was within the Sub-Postmaster Deficiency Collection team.
Was this a group that you communicated regularly with?
No, these groups, as I've said before, they really were a movable feast. People would move in and out of these contract lists.
I mean, there are some names that crop up time and time again in the documents that we've seen, such as Rod Isme. Was there a particular reason why these kinds of emails were going to him?
I can't remember what his title was at the time.
I'd like to read you briefly from this email. It goes, summary of facts, Castleton. Perhaps we could scroll down a little bit further. He says at the bottom of that bottom paragraph, as part of the claim, the solicitors for Lee Castleton have stated in the allocation questionnaire that they intend to call evidence from other existing and former postmasters about the problems with the Horizon system. They have asked for disclosure of data about all calls or complaints logged from the postmasters about the Horizon system, presumably from the inception of the system. They've called for disclosure of all documents removed from the branch office during the investigation. There is an issue over locating all of those documents. And then you summarise the case of Bajaj, and perhaps we could look at the final paragraph on that page. It says, Mr. Bajaj has taken the step of writing an article in the Sub-Postmaster November 2005 edition seeking information from other postmasters in a similar situation. And then you highlight their issues. In each case, the postmasters are challenging the validity of data provided by the Horizon system, and the cases became litigious before that evidence could be properly investigated. In each case, it was known that Horizon was going to be challenged, but there was no procedure in place to A, acquire the necessary data, B, identify somebody with the relevant knowledge and capacity to interpret the data and report the same. If the challenge is not met, the ability of the Post Office to rely on Horizon for data will be compromised and the future prosperity of the network compromised. What did you mean by the future prosperity of the network compromised?
Paul's ability to rely upon the Horizon system was absolutely crucial for the continuation of Paul as a business.
So you had challenges from sub-postmasters here, Castleton and Bajaj, that you were concerned about. The future of the network was at stake, and you make 5 suggestions, and I'd just like to take you through those suggestions. The first, a robust procedure is set up and communicated to all relevant parties for extracting necessary data from Horizon at an early stage in all cases leading towards possible termination of contract in each case where the Horizon data is challenged. Second, you talk about identifying a small team and training them in the interpretation and investigation techniques. Third, Fujitsu and the Post Office to liaise on identifying a number of individuals or specialist computer firms who could provide a professional and independent report upon the Horizon system in general and in the two cases to hand if necessary. Now, just pausing there, the evidence this morning was very much that you took each case as it came, each case individually, weren't coordinating the various cases. This is quite, it seems, a significant suggestion that the Post Office and Fujitsu should identify an external firm to carry out an independent report. Do you recall making that recommendation?
This is my communication. I wish to ensure that for each and every case that we always litigated on a purely independent basis, and by that I mean on the facts of every single case, that we'd be in the best possible position to litigate by having all relevant data. I was somewhat frustrated by the fact that proceedings had been issued in the matter of Mr. Lee Castleton without all appropriate data being present. I was seeking, therefore, to try to persuade the powers that be within Paul. I can't now recall to whom entirely this communication went, but I was trying to persuade the business that they really should put procedures in place that would give solicitors such as myself a better chance of being able to litigate successfully. But I was just a caseworker.
If we look at page 3, that has the recipient list that we've already been through. You say you can't recall, but whose responsibility within that list would it have been to take forward the recommendation of identifying an independent external firm who could carry out an investigation of Horizon?
I think, this just to the best of my recollection and my opinion, that David Smith was the most senior person on that list of contacts. And as at the end of 2005, going into 2006, 2007, was that independent report commissioned? No. Were you concerned that it wasn't commissioned? Of the, I think, 5 or so recommendations that I made, I was less concerned about the commission of an independent report than I was about the creation of a team or even an individual who would gather sufficient knowledge of the system so as to be able to give proper instructions on each case to external solicitors so that we didn't end up in another situation where proceedings were issued without all the relevant material being present. And was that coordinating role established as at 2005, 2006 and onwards? The nearest it ever got was an offer by Mr. Tony Utting, who is 3rd or 4th on the communication list, who said that he was prepared to do so, but then I think he referred to it as the sting in the tail. His department had been tasked with reducing headcount by a percentage. So ultimately, no such position was ever created, and I think that late on in 2000, when Andy Greening was trying to get a grip of the whole sub-postmaster estate, that was still outstanding. Thank you. If we look just to complete this document, on that page we were on before, page 5, there were 2 other recommendations there. The 4th and 5th, if we scroll down, thank you. So one was investigating whether or not they hold any data of the number of complaints, and the 5th was identifying members of staff who can provide witness statements.
Can we move on to poll 000070496, please? This is a similar time, and this is a couple of days earlier. If we look at the bottom email from Tom Beezer, this is updating various individuals about the position of the Lee Castleton case, and he outlines there some concerns you had. It says, I spoke to Mandy, she's a little disturbed that this matter has wide implications, and this is talking about the default judgment, and then it refers there, as we've spoken about this morning, Hugh James are currently trying to contain an embryonic and not yet issued class action, scrolling over the page, relating to the Horizon system. A judgment in relation to it is currently very bad news. And then there are requests from you. And it says, Mandy has made a number of requests that I feel we must comply with. One, that you're kept fully informed of the Castleton matter. Two, that you be sent a full set of proceedings and a full set of correspondence. Three, due to the matters handled by Hugh James relating to Horizon, Mandy asks that we speak to them to ensure that we're all pulling in the same direction. This is even more important given the threatened class action. Who makes this call is partly dictated by how many Horizon-related cases we currently have. More on this below. And then four, Mandy asks that we never issue proceedings on a claim based on Horizon evidence without her specific consent. Now, that role not having been created, the Horizon coordination role, were you in some way filling the vacuum and fulfilling that role?
In respect of cases that were being dealt with by Bond Pierce, yes. But that was purely in respect of litigation. It was not my role to coordinate anything on behalf of Pol or Fujitsu. This was just my concern as a litigator to understand what and which cases Bond Pierce were already instructed to issue proceedings upon. I did not want another repeat of Castleton.
Four, you asked that they never issue proceedings without your specific consent. Why was that?
Because, as I've just said, I didn't think it was appropriate on the case of Castleton, the proceedings had ever been issued before without missing documentation in place, leading to a very expensive defence of a counterclaim. If they were to issue proceedings on a sub-postmaster case, I wanted to make certain that all the appropriate documentation was going to be in place, and I was still hoping at this time that it would be possible for Pol to commission a team to facilitate that going forward.
You described in your evidence earlier that you were just a caseworker.
I was.
This doesn't sound much like the role of a caseworker. It sounds as though you're applying some management of the Horizon cases. Is that fair?
I was never a manager of the Horizon cases. I just tried to deal with cases that came into my inbox.
Who were you doing this for?
Usually, error resolution team at Chesterfield.
I mean, they're specific and quite... the language used is rather mandatory. Was this you on your own asserting control, or were you acting on somebody else's behalf in instructing Bond Pierce in this way?
No, this was me trying to fill my role as a solicitor, in-house solicitor for Post Office Limited in this case. This was me acting to try and ensure that a repetition of issuing proceedings in a Castleton situation didn't occur again.
Can we look at poll 000090437? It's page 63. This is a bundle of papers that we've looked at already. Can we look at page 63, please? We're still sticking with the theme of management knowledge. Page 63 is an email from yourself to a very similar list of names, common names that we've seen before: David Smith, Rod Isme, etc. This is you passing on the good news about the Castleton case. It's a document that I think we looked at earlier. And it's where you say, you update them about the progress of the negotiations. Why this particular list on this particular occasion? It's quite a detailed note of negotiations. It's not a summary of what's happened. It's very much contemporaneous. This is happening. Why would people in other parts of the post office's business be interested in that, or why would they have received that?
This is really rather similar to the list of the document we looked at 2 documents back.
Yes.
Therefore, these were individuals who had an interest in the case of Mr. Castleton.
Do you know why they weren't particularly interested in the case of Mr. Castleton?
I can't speak to that, I'm sorry.
Can we look at page 33 of the same document? And it's the second half of the page. So the bottom page, even. You're there updating the entire group, 2007 now. This is just to let you know that we've been completely successful in defending all of the allegations made by Mr. Castleton. You'll recall that he contended that no genuine losses occurred whilst he was a postmaster, and that any losses were manufactured by the Horizon system. The judgment has entirely vindicated the Horizon system. Again, similar, if not the same, distribution list. Was it common for updates of cases to be sent to this distribution list, or is there something particularly special about the Castleton case?
The importance of the Castleton case was the size of the counterclaim and the, in effect, attack on the Horizon system.
And if we look above, we have a response from Rod Isme. Sorry, it's down. And Rod Isme there says, "Thanks, Mandy, great news." And then the next paragraph, "What can we do on a proactive comms front here? We've watched the various inflammatory letters in the sub-postmaster letters page and wanted to be able to assure branches and clients that they can rely on the integrity of Horizon. Any thoughts on comms following this case?" What role did Rod Isme have in respect of comms and communications? I mean, he was the head of product and branch accounting. Would you have understood it as to be part of his job to be promoting communications here?
I don't know what the extent of his function was at the time. It may well have included comms. There was a comms team at Royal Mail Group headquarters.
Let's look at a document that makes a similar point. It's poll 001134888. We're now in 20th of February of 2007, and this is where Mr. Castleton has agreed to pay the costs. If we scroll down, please, to the second half of the page. Similar names on this distribution list: Keith Baines, John Cole, Rod Isme, etc. And it says Castleton has agreed to our total bill for costs in writing, which means that we do not have to go to court to have them taxed, which incurs additional legal costs in its own right. This response also indicates that Castleton has no intention of appealing against the decision of the court, and the judgment is the final comment on the matter. As such, we need to get on with making as much use of the judgment as possible. Stephen Dilly has asked for permission to publish an article in a legal journal about the case, which I have no objection to as long as we maintain editorial control, as the more publicity the case is given, the greater should be its effect upon sub-postmasters who take legal advice about defending claims for repayment. Outstanding matters are communicating the matter to the Fed, agreeing a suitable form of words, possibly with the assistance of external relations, arranging a meeting with Fujitsu, proposed form of words, agreeing with the auditors that they will formally ask for, examine and refer to at least 3 months' worth of branch trading statements in future cases, etc. Do you think it was appropriate for somebody who describes themselves as just a caseworker to be making suggestions on how to publicise the result of a court case?
It wasn't, in retrospect. I can only assume that that has something to do with the document that we looked at previously.
In 2007, that you hadn't moved on to your 2010 role in the wider post office. You were still managing civil litigation at this stage. Why do you think you were drawn into making use of the judgment and commenting on ways in which it would be publicised?
I don't know. I can only assume there is a missing minute of a conversation where possibly I was asked to assist on this matter. I agree with you. This is not the role of an ordinary civil litigator, and this was possibly the one and only time that this ever occurred.
Do you think it was inappropriate to be doing that?
As an ordinary civil litigator, yes, it was. But I can only conclude that I was asked to do so by some of the parties to whom that communication is addressed.
You were asked to, you say, by one of those people, but...
I assume.
You assume. Did you ever raise any concerns with anybody about the position that you were being put in?
No.
Can we please look at poll 00104618, please? We're now in August 2008. Mm-hmm. Can we please look at the second page? In the bottom half of the second page, we have an email from Andrew Wynne. And we'll see in due course that this is forwarded to you. Do you recall Andrew Wynne?
I don't recall Andrew Wynne, and I don't believe I ever dealt with this email, as the writing on it isn't mine. It could well have been dealt with whilst I was away on annual leave.
Let's just have a look at what it says. It says, comms to branches. I think we still do not have clear sign-up around who will be communicated to. My understanding is that the business only wants to contact branches who have reported the discrepancy or who have suffered financial loss by making good an inflated amount. We'll see in due course through the later email what this is all about. It's about a software glitch within Horizon. And this email is a discussion about who to tell about the software glitch, whether you tell the individual branches who have suffered the glitch or whether you communicate it more widely. Do you recall this at all?
No. I believe it could have been dealt with by my line manager, given the manuscript comments on the document.
It says there This accepts the risk that other branches may raise the issue with the post office at a later date. In terms of communication script, I would have thought something on the lines of Singleton makes good loss, your branch received a software change to Horizon, this has caused a stock unit discrepancy to be calculated incorrectly, and as a result you have made good a loss of X amount, whereas the correct loss/gain should be Y amount. Post Office Limited need to compensate you for the loss and will send you a cheque for the above amount. Can I confirm the name that is required? And then over the page, where a Singleton, sorry, if we could scroll down so we could just see the top of the page before, where a branch has actually made a gain, the proposal there is Post Office don't intend to recover the gain. If we go to page 1 of this document, please. Sorry, if we go over the page, actually to page 2, you have an email from Rod Isme, who says there, hi Andy, before anyone sends any comms anywhere, please can you get confirmation that Mandy Talbot / Biddy Wiles in legal have seen and are okay with proposed wording. Now, why was Rod Isme suggesting that you comment on wording that was sent to branches following the identification of a software glitch?
My reading of these communications is a request by Rod Isme for myself or Biddy, who was my line manager at the time, to look at the drafting of the letter. It's headed comms, but I would have interpreted as a letter that they proposed to send to individual branches who had suffered from this particular glitch. It was really, it was also part of our function, although we were a civil litigation department, to assist many departments within POL and Royal Mail Group with drafting correspondence if they felt they needed assistance.
And did Rod Isme put your name forward in particular because he knew that you were dealing with issues relating to the Horizon system?
I think you would have to ask him on that.
Is it something that you would typically be asked about, irrespective of your involvement in the Horizon system, or is it more likely that this was being provided to you because of your knowledge of the Horizon system?
We were asked to draft, in some cases, comment and edit letters from all different departments in the whole of Royal Mail Group.
Let's look at the first page. This is the email that is sent to you. Mm-hmm. So it's sent to you and Biddy Wiles. It says, not sure if you're the right people to contact regarding this. Basically, we recently suffered a software glitch within the Horizon system, which resulted in various over/underpayments, both actual and virtual, to certain, but definitely not all, post office branches. We're trying to come up with suitable wording to use in explaining these over/underpayments and how we intend on correcting them. And we're wondering if you were the right legal people to run this past first. Now, is it your evidence that you never saw this email, despite it being sent to you?
If I were away on holiday, but my line manager, Biddy, whose handwriting I think I recognise on the documents that were disclosed to me, had already dealt with it, I would have been very grateful that that was something I didn't have to look at.
Do you recall in 2008 it being brought to your attention that there was a software glitch with Horizon which resulted in various over/underpayments?
Until such time as this material was disclosed, no, I do not. I have no recollection of it.
Are you aware of any similar references to software glitches around this time that was communicated throughout the department or throughout senior figures within the post office, for example?
I can't speak as to senior members of the post office. legal services were a distinct unit in their own right. I can only speak as to what I personally knew.
And you're not aware of that having been communicated amongst your team? Can we look back at a document that we have already looked at today, and that is Pol 000537778. And can we look at page 5, please? Thank you. It's the bottom of that page. So we saw there, that is the email from yourself to Michelle Graves and others about the prosecution of a former postmistress and allegations about the Horizon system. If we turn to page 1 of this document, we have an email being forwarded from yourself to Warwick Tatford, and it says, Warwick, I've made inquiries of our chairman's office team, which deals with high-profile correspondence. They know nothing of Mrs. Nixon or Dixon of Highcliffe, and it's signed by you there. I think now it says Dispute Resolution Company Secretary's Office. By this stage, were you in a different team?
I was in exactly the same department. It's just we'd stopped becoming litigators. We were now dispute resolutors.
And you're there mentioning inquiries of the chairman's office.
Yes.
How often was it part of your job to liaise with the chairman's office?
It was not part of my job to liaise with the chairman's office, but quite often we would receive requests for assistance from the chairman's office, and therefore I knew the names of people to ask in the chairman's office who did indeed deal with high-profile correspondence sent to the group. I knew their identities, so I knew who to contact there to see if they had any record of Mrs. Nixon or Dixon.
Who in particular would you liaise with in the chairman's office?
In this instance, it appears to be Michelle Graves. But again, there were lots of different team members over the 20-odd years I was dealing with the chairman's office.
If we stick to 2010, who in particular would you deal with in the chairman's office?
Well, on this occasion, I think it's apparent that it was Michelle Graves.
And was there anybody else who you liaised with in the chairman's office during this period?
I cannot recall. Possibly if there's other emails, I might recognise the names.
In this period, to your knowledge, was the chairman's office aware of complaints from those who were being prosecuted about the Horizon system?
I cannot speak to what the chairman's office or their staff knew. This is merely an example of me seeking information from them.
Do you think it's likely that when you were seeking information from them, you would have told them that there is a case ongoing that is making a complaint about the Horizon system?
It's possible.
Do you recall what the inquiries were that you were making at that time?
This was in connection with the case of Misra, judging by the time period.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to another document, Pol 001068667, please. This is a pile of correspondence, and I'm going to go through 3 or 4 emails within this pile. Can we start, please, with page 27? Thank you. Could we scroll down to the bottom half of that page? You're not at this stage copied in, although you are within the chain, and I'll take you to the relevant email. But this is an email from Andrew Daly, to Jason Collins, Graham Brander. We have Andy Hayward BCC'd in. Andy Hayward was from the security team. Do you remember him?
It's a name I recognise.
It says, Jason Graham, Andy called me and asked whether you guys could put together some stats on these cases where the accused defence is the Horizon data is unreliable for any amount of reasons given by the accused. And he attaches there an article which it's titled there Horizon Blamed.pdf. This is February 2010. I mean, this sounds like much the kind of thing that you were recommending in 2005, isn't it?
I was recommending in 2005 that a sensible process be put up to assist us with civil litigation cases.
This is the 25th of February, 11:49. Can we now turn to page 25? In the bottom email, we have the same date, now 4:10 p.m. And it says, Andrew, Jason, I'm aware of 2 ongoing cases at West Byfleet or Orford Road, and also some historical cases. We wouldn't have Horizon, but as FI, is that, do you understand what that means at all?
For information, possibly?
We wouldn't have Horizon disputed cases other than those reported by the investigators who would have far more details on the issues than us. And then he says this, I've attached an article from an IT magazine which may have brought this issue to the fore in the first place and which may be of interest to Ian. Do you remember the article that's referred to in this correspondence at all?
I've seen reference to it, but I can't remember ever reading it.
Can we please look at page 3 of this chain? Thank you. If we look at the bottom half, we're now at the 26th of February, and Andy Hayward has included you as the first recipient of this email. I'm going to take you through it. Do you recall receiving this email?
Not until it was disclosed, no.
It says as follows, following our conference call today, below is a brief summary of the agreed key activities to progress the next steps in relation to the above piece of work, the above being the subject, challenges to Horizon. Do you recall that conference call taking place?
I don't.
AH and MT, presumably the MT is yourself, Mandy
so.
Talbot. AH presumably is Andy Hayward. Is that right?
I assume so. I think there is a list of our
Yes,
initials at the end of this document.
Absolutely. If we scroll down, we can see exactly who was in attendance. It's over the page, unfortunately. Thank you. There we have MT, Mandy Talbot, RI, Rod Isme, RM, Rebecca Mantle, Dave King, Sue Lothar, Dave Posnett, Andy Hayward. So if we go back, it has you providing information on past and present cases with reference to the Horizon challenges. And it says, note, I've asked the fraud team to review approximately the past 2 to 3 years case file, although these challenges are of a more recent nature. Do you recall the decision to review 2 to 3 years of case files?
No. All that would have concerned me on receipt of this email is to try to provide Andy, on behalf of Sue, with any information I had that could assist them with this piece of work.
The case of Castleton, for example, and the case of Cleveley's, they were older than 2 to 3 years. Do you recall around the 2010 time talking to these individuals about the Cleveley's case or about the Castleton case?
No, and I wouldn't have. I would only have provided what information I had about civil litigation cases. The reference to the fraud team there, they were the investigators that fed into the prosecution department. So that really wouldn't have involved me.
And then information security to conduct initial investigations and provide terms of reference outlining remit and requirements to carry out a full investigation. So the proposal seems to be that the information security team conduct an initial investigation, but that is then followed by what's called a full investigation. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the conference call, but as it is recorded on this document, then that must be what happened.
If we look at the third piece of work, subject to agreement of 2 above, conduct full investigations into integrity issues with conclusion/report provided. Once investigated and conclusions drawn, gain external verification to give a level of external gravitas to the response to these challenges. Recommend Ernst & Young as most suitable partner to complete this. Was there, in fact, a full investigation into integrity issues that was verified in some way by an external firm?
If that ever occurred, I was never made aware of it.
And in fact, you don't recall this meeting?
I don't, but I suspect that it was probably a telephone conference call, and we had lots and lots of those.
Do you recall in February 2010 the discussion about a full investigation into integrity issues?
I cannot recall it, but as it is recorded on this document, it must have occurred. I can't, unfortunately, assist the inquiry any further on this point than what is already written on the document.
Isn't that entirely consistent with your recommendation back in 2005 that there be a full investigation?
And that is why I was very happy to support it.
And what did you do in respect of supporting it?
I believe, though I would have been prepared to provide what information I had about civil sub-postmaster deficiency cases to Sue Lowther, but I do not think, because of an intervention by the head of criminal law, that this piece of work proceeded any further. But that is just my opinion.
Being consistent with your suggestion in 2005, do you recall having spoke out in favour of this full investigation into integrity issues?
Given that I had originally suggested something similar in 2005, although I cannot recall it, I suspect that I probably did.
Do you recall any conversations?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Can we look at page 1? This is the email, the intervention that you've referred to. Actually, sorry, if we look at the bottom of page 1, you'll see that Dave Posnett there forwards the earlier chains to Rob Wilson. He says, can we please ensure that Rob Wilson, head of criminal law, Royal Mail Group, is kept appraised of the situation? And if we scroll up, this is his response. Do you recall why Rob Wilson wasn't invited to that original meeting?
No, I don't. As I say, I don't actually recall the telephone. I really do suspect that it probably was a telephone conference. I've no idea why he wasn't invited to that original conference.
Having been what you described as just a caseworker up until this point, was it not significant to you that you were being drawn into what was quite a significant step on behalf of the Post Office?
Well, both I and my line manager, Rebecca Mansell, were litigators. And in effect, we had an interest in the business being able to litigate as efficiently as possible. And given my recommendations in December 2005, I wasn't too surprised to be involved in this.
Is it not something that you would have had quite a good recollection of, given that it was one of the more recent incidents, 2010, we're not going back to 2005 now, and that you were being involved in what is quite a significant enterprise on behalf of the Post Office?
I wish my memory were that good. I'm sorry, I can't assist any further.
Can we look at page 1 and the top of page 1? And this is the email response from Rob Wilson. I'm going to read from quite a lot of it. It says, Dave, if it's thought that there is a difficulty with Horizon, then clearly the action set out in your memo is not only needed, but is imperative. The consequence, however, will be that to commence or continue to proceed with any criminal proceedings will be inappropriate. My understanding is that the integrity of Horizon data is sound, and it is as a result of this that persistent challenges that have been made in court have always failed. These challenges are not new and have been with us since the inception of Horizon, as it has always been the only way that defendants are left to challenge our evidence when they have stolen money or where they need to show that our figures are not correct. What is being suggested is that an internal investigation is conducted. Such an investigation will be disclosable as undermining evidence on the defence in the cases proceeding through the criminal courts. Inevitably, the defence will argue that if we're carrying out an investigation, we clearly do not have confidence in Horizon, and therefore to continue to prosecute will be an abuse of the criminal process. Pausing there, is that something that you recall being said to you in these discussions?
I don't remember the discussions, and this is the opinion of a criminal prosecutor.
The concern that appears to be being raised in this email is that by carrying out an investigation, that will be disclosable as undermining evidence. Would you not remember something that significant?
I'm afraid I don't.
If we continue the third paragraph, to continue prosecuting alleged offenders knowing that there's an ongoing investigation to determine the veracity of Horizon could also be detrimental to the reputation of my team. If we were to secure convictions and the knowledge that there was an investigation, where the investigation established a difficulty with the system, we would be open to criticism and appeal to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal will inevitably be highly critical of any prosecutor's decision to proceed against the defendants in the knowledge that there could be an issue with the evidence. Again, quite a, you might think, a significant statement, that it could be detrimental, that if they secure convictions and the knowledge that there was an investigation where the investigation established a difficulty, they'd be open to criticism. This is 2010, so quite a long time before the Court of Appeal ultimately heard these cases. Given the significance of such a statement, do you still not recall receiving this, discussing it?
I'm afraid I don't, but I can see that the second person to whom this document is addressed, Mr. Doug Evans, was the solicitor at the time.
There is, of course, reference below to civil litigation. It says, what we really need to do is impress on Fujitsu the importance of fully cooperating in the provision of technical expertise and witness statements to support the criminal and civil litigation now and in the future. Given the nature of the discussions that took place on the 26th of February, I'm staggered that I was not invited to take part in the conference. In light of the implications of this potential report, I think you said that it wasn't ultimately pursued, the independent investigation, and you linked it in some way to this email. Can you assist us with how you link the two?
Given the concerns raised by Mr. Wilson, this is only my opinion, I assume that this dissuaded the Information Security Department from proceeding with their original intention. But that is just my opinion.
We can look at another email that you were copied into on page 9 of this chain. It's an email from Susan Lothar of the Information Security Team, and she says, as was discussed on the conference call and taking into account Rob's comments to confirm that what we're looking at is a general due diligence exercise on the integrity of Horizon to confirm our belief in the robustness of the system and thus rebut any challenges. Looking back at that original email where the discussion had been taking place to carry out an exercise, is that a fair description of what seems to have been discussed at the original meeting, that it was simply going to be a general due diligence exercise?
I'm afraid, as I've said before, I cannot remember the original conference call meeting.
And there's one final document then I'll take you to in this pack, and I'll leave it at that. It's page 15. The final. Thank you very much. Dave King, security architect, continues on this email chain. You're still copied in, 8th of March, 3:27 p.m. Mm-hmm. As discussed, I can confirm that we're in no way questioning or investigating the financial integrity of Horizon or of the accounting system as a whole. The Information Security Review is to look at the ways in which messages are sent at a system level. Again, is that consistent really with what was being proposed at the meeting at which you attended?
I'm afraid I cannot recall the precise detail of that meeting. I'm sorry, but I can't assist further.
Okay. Eventually, we have something that we refer to as the Isme report. Can we look at poll 000265572? You're copied into this report from Mr. Isme, the date of the 2nd of August 2010. You may not be able to assist us, but is this something that arose out of that meeting, or is there something else?
I do not know whether this document arose directly out of the original Sue Lowther proposal just discussed.
Were you involved in the drafting of this report in any way?
No. I may have been asked for information by Mr. Isme, but I had no involvement in the drafting of it whatsoever.
All of the things that we've been talking about today, the Cleveley's case, the report from Jason Coyne, the Castleton case, the report from BDO, all of the various reports to you over the years where people were complaining about the Horizon system, are these matters that you passed on to Rod Isme as part of his investigation?
If he had asked for information as broadly as you've just defined it, then I would have provided that to him. But after this period of time, and with no documentary evidence recording what I sent or did not send to him, I cannot assist further.
Your evidence today was that you dealt with each case individually.
That is correct.
Do you think that you took that attitude in respect of inquiries that were made by Rod Isme?
I don't know. It all depends what he asked me for. I would have done my best to provide him with what information I had.
Can we please now look at poll 000555418. We're still in 2010. We're now in October, 8th of October 2010. This is an email from yourself to Jarnell Singh, copied to Mike Granville and Rod Isme, and the subject is the Horizon trial. It seems as though this may be the Misra case. It says, Mike and Rod are very interested in any developments at the trial next week which impact on Horizon. You promised to let me know if anything unfortunate occurred in respect of Horizon. Please can you copy Rod and Mike into any messages? Incidentally, I assume that we've briefed external relations. Can you let us know who you've briefed, because Mike and Rod may wish to have input into any story relating to Horizon. They may give you a call on, and it gives a number. Incidentally, Postmasters for Justice met with the Minister this week and were accompanied by Izzy Hogg and the lady from Shoesmiths. We spoke earlier about whether it was appropriate to get involved in matters relating to publicity, etc. What exactly was your role here in relation to the Horizon system and in relation to more senior members of the Post Office?
I didn't recall this document until it was disclosed. I believe to a large extent I was just performing the role of being a conduit between more senior members of the Pol business and Mr. Janal Singh, who was dealing with the case of Horizon, which had become the next, the case of Misra, which had become the next test case on the Horizon system.
And was Misra, I think we've discussed this already, very much seen as that test case, very similar to Castleton in that respect?
I believe that it was, although I had much less knowledge about it simply because it was a prosecution, not a civil action.
Do you think here you're once again being used in a policy role rather than a legal role?
I have never been involved in a policy or a strategy role. I can only assume that I had been asked by Mike Granville and Rod Isme to keep them updated with developments in this case.
And you've told us that you weren't involved in criminal prosecutions and rarely came across them. Why you, in particular, why were you dealing with this on behalf of Mike and Rod?
This was an unusual case because, as I referred earlier, the barrister in the case of Misra had been in touch personally to ask for information. And therefore, I believe on this case alone, I was performing that conduit function.
Can we move on to poll 000620075, please? Here we're in 2014, so you now are in your regulatory role.
Yes.
And you're receiving information relating to a criminal prosecution.
Excuse me, if I can interrupt. I suspect that I was copied into that by mistake. I assume I was on original template and they just never bothered to remove me. I would have had nothing to do with any prosecution case in 2014. I was firmly embedded in the compliance team within Royal Mail Group by then. It might have had my CC on it, but I would never have come across this document.
But even in 2005, 2006 or onwards, prior to your moving roles, why would you be copied into the result of a criminal case?
I would have been copied into the result of a criminal case in the pre-POCA days, where there'd been a failure to obtain an order for compensation, so that civil could assess on behalf of the business whether there was any viability of bringing civil proceedings to achieve a recovery.
Thank you. I have two more topics to address. I should finish them hopefully before the break, otherwise we'll take a break and I'll finish the final topic. There'll then be a small number of questions on behalf of court participants. I want to briefly address the general strategy that was pursued against Mr. Castleton. And can we look at poll 0007242? This is an attendance note that we saw, that I went through with Mr. Dilly, and it's paragraph 3, about halfway down, that I'd like to look at. It's the 16th of October 2006. And it says there, counsel therefore wants to play some brinkmanship with the other side, i.e. push for a December trial, but preserving our ability to get that adjourned if they serve a late report that we need to deal with. I said that we would prepare for a December trial if necessary, and I was happy to do so, but I was concerned to make sure that we could reply to any experts' reports served by Castleton. I also think that our counsel was effectively trying to ambush the other side because he thinks that when we serve these 15 witness statements on them, they'll be knocked reeling a bit. Mandy appreciates the tactics of this. She said the only thing was with a December trial is that the post office get very busy, etc. Were you happy with the general approach that was taken in Mr. Castleton's case?
As detailed in the paragraph we're looking at, yes, I was.
And it seems there as though Stephen Dilly certainly thought that you were providing instructions. Can you, I think the answer is going to be no, because we've been over this a few times today, but can you recall who in the post office, other than yourself, was driving this strategy?
I'm afraid I can't. I would have obtained instructions, but after this period of time, I'm sorry, I can't assist.
Can we look at poll 000694453, please? This is another attendance note, this time the 18th, so 2 days after. And it said, I had a conversation with Mandy Talbot. She has spoken to Claire and Catherine at the post office. They are happy to follow counsel's advice and go for a December trial purely as a tactic, even though acknowledging that it's an unlikely event, etc. Does that assist you with identifying who at the post office, at least in respect of that particular strategy, was providing the instructions?
This was a reference to Claire Wardle, my immediate line manager in legal services, and Catherine Churchyard, who was the solicitor to the post office, as the whole organisation was known as back at that time.
Does that assist you in respect of any of the evidence that you've already given today? I know you asked to be pointed to specific documents. Does that assist you?
This is an example of me escalating up within civil litigation the advice that I'd been given to ensure that they were satisfied with the same. I would imagine that there would have been a similar escalation within the Poll side of the business at the same time. But I can't assist with the identity of those parties after this period of time.
Okay. The final topic before we take a break is the difficulty or issues relating to obtaining information from Fujitsu. Mm-hmm. Can we look at poll 000828080? And it's page 6. This is an email from Stephen Dilly to yourself. Mm-hmm. And if we could scroll down, please, it says, both I copied you into my Epic email, but the response to the same has been limited in the extreme. I attached the responses of Graham Ward and David Talbot. I've also been contacted by John Cole asking for assistance in preparing a spec for external expert or experts, but I think that this is of limited use until we have reports completed by Fujitsu on the system and Pol on the data provided. However, in respect of an external expert from the field of computer systems and accounting, can you suggest any names? And then it says, Stephen, in the collation of evidence, did you come across anyone who you believe could actually interpret the information which was obtained from Fujitsu via Graham or the paper documents which are available from the post office? As you can see, I'm still getting the runaround on these cases by people who are not prepared to assist. Do you recall any issues with getting people to assist, and if so, who?
In the matter of Castleton, I believe that Stephen Dilly was able to eventually obtain assistance and witness statements from persons within Fujitsu. However, I've alluded to the fact that in ordinary civil cases, it could be very challenging to obtain information and evidence from Fujitsu.
There's a message passed on, it's forwarding a message from Graham, casework manager at the post office. If we scroll down a little bit, and this is addressed to you, Mandy, and it says that there at the bottom, with regards to my knowledge of Horizon, I can obtain data as and when required, being the SPOC between the post office and Fujitsu, but I do not have the working knowledge of the system to analyze data and comment on whether Horizon was working correctly or not, or whether transactions have been processed correctly and may still affect the office balance. I know Tony Yu has agreed to have a look at the Marine Drive data, but he is still waiting to hear exactly what information needs analyzing. And it's over the page. It says, Fujitsu should be able to offer a technical perspective of the system working properly. I've searched my records of previous statements received and have found one where Brian Pinder's predecessor, Bill Mitchell, provided a statement. See below, and we'll see that below, commenting on individual calls to the help desk, and then including a general paragraph stating that none of these calls would have had an effect on the integrity of the data on the system. If we scroll down, he says at the top there, presumably Dave will, if we scroll up to the top of the page, He says, perhaps I should ask Fujitsu to provide a similar type of statement in respect of Marine Drive. What do you think? And then if we scroll down to the bottom, near the bottom of this email, it's a little confusing as to who everything in this email comes from. Yeah. But he says, Fujitsu's responses thus far haven't really helped answer the questions posed in each case. Their written responses have been brief, to say the least. My own opinion, therefore, is that the post office needs to cover off all questions relating to office misbalancing and transaction details, and that Fujitsu should provide us with a general statement for each case, as per the statement above from Bill Mitchell, detailing calls made to the help desk. Did you have any concerns about using a generic form of words in these cases, such as the one that is at the top of this page?
I don't think we did use a generic form of words. I think they were prepared to begin with a generic and then make it specific to the events at Marine Drive.
So the suggestion at the top, if we could go to the top, is that there was some general form of words. And we may or may not, during the course of this inquiry, come to a number of statements that look very similar in how they're formulated, certain forms of words. Do you have any recollection of general statements being used in witness statements?
This may have been something that was utilised in the prosecution sphere. Yes. But they were tailored and unique insofar as we were dealing with civil litigation.
Can we look at Pol 000-72692, please? This is the last document that I'll take you to myself and the last document before the break. This is the attendance note of the 7th of April 2006 from Stephen Dilly. It's a document that we have seen before. It says, before the Post Office joined the call, Stephen Dilly and Tom Beezer had a telephone conversation with Ian Herbert, agreeing that Post Office had difficulty obtaining information from Fujitsu and that the strategy should be to identify key individuals at Fujitsu who could provide the relevant information. It then says the Post Office joined the telephone conversation and Tom Beezer outlined our proposal to Mandy Talbot. Mandy broadly agreed, etc. Do you recall problems obtaining information from Fujitsu?
As I mentioned earlier, prosecution was entitled to 100 reports or analyses per year. We were left in a situation where if they hadn't utilised that 100, we were entitled to request. Anything over and above that, Fujitsu would charge. And sometimes Paul, I suspect, was not prepared to bear that cost.
Did you understand the difference in various types of information that was available from Fujitsu, such as ARQ data, audit trail, raw audit data, enhanced ARQ?
I'm not an expert in that field. I knew there were 4 lines of calls that a sub-postmaster could make to various help desks, etc. And I knew that there was data that only Fujitsu had access to, but I didn't know the detail and I couldn't distinguish one type of data from another.
And contractually, I think it's your evidence that essentially the civil litigation team were an afterthought in respect of
Correct.
the ability to obtain it.
Correct.
Thank you. Sir, we do have some questions from recognised legal representatives, not a huge amount, but I think if you're content, I think this may be the appropriate moment to take a 20-minute break.
20 minutes would take us to 10 to 4.
Sorry,
15-minute
break, sorry.
Well, okay, 3:45. I just want to give notice to everyone that just as in the case of Mr. Dilly, I do find it difficult to retain proper levels of conversation after about 4:15. So those questions need to be tailored with that in mind. I can see you, Mr. Blake. What's the reaction amongst your fellow barristers?
A fair few smiles. They agree.
All right, fine. So 15 minutes. So
Thank you very
between
much.
9:45 and 10 to, yeah.
Thank you, sir. We have questions from Ms. Page and Mr. Steen.
Yeah.
Ms. Talbot, I act for a number of the sub-postmasters in this case, including Mr. Castleton. There'd be little point putting documents to you and asking you who actually gave you instructions in the Castleton case, because you won't tell, will you?
It's not that I won't tell, it's that I cannot recall after this period of time. And it was a revolving selection of managers within Post Office Limited.
Well, somebody needed to approve the expenditure of £321,000 in legal costs for the sake of a precedent. Which department, will you tell us at least that, which department of Pol could have possibly justified that?
I cannot after this period of time, I'm sorry.
Well, there was a clear advantage to your own department, wasn't there? Because by bankrupting Mr. Castleton, you could threaten other sub-postmasters who disputed Horizon shortfalls, and you could threaten them with the same fate, couldn't you?
I didn't run a department, and it was an advantage for Post Office Limited, not myself or my colleagues.
But it was your job, wasn't it, to use the precedent that you had achieved?
I don't personally ever recall using the case of Castleton as a precedent.
Well, it was a very expensive precedent. It must have been used sometimes.
I assume it was by Post Office Limited and departments in that.
Do you recall Mr. Morgan gave an advice at the end, which was of use to as a precedent for Poll?
Excuse me, Mr. Morgan gave an advice?
That's right.
Yes, I do recall that, and I remember feeding recommendations back to Poll.
So at least that was of use to them, wasn't it?
Correct.
And what about the cases of Mr. Bajaj and Mr. Bilku? What did you instruct your external lawyers to say to them about the Castleton case?
I don't recall instructing external agents on Bajaj or Bilku. I suspect that Post Office Limited would have sent those cases directly out to our external agents.
Do you think they were authorised to refer to the bankruptcy proceedings as well as just relying on the judgment?
I have no idea.
I'm just going to refer you to one document only. It's part of the large document POL 309-0437. And when we get there, if we could just straddle pages 33 and 34, please. There's an email there. We've looked at it. We've looked at it in part already. I'm just going to draw your attention to one bit. So if we scroll down a little bit and we sort of spread over the pages of 33 and 34, this was you telling a group of 10 people within Poll about the great news, the successful result in the Castleton trial, and that the judgment had entirely vindicated the Horizon system. If we scroll down a little bit further, the final paragraph of your email was, Mr. Castleton appeared to be stunned by the result and did not apply for leave to appeal against the decision. Stunned. Why do you think you would have mentioned that?
I wasn't present in court at the case involving Mr. Castleton, so this would have been based on a report given to me by Bond Pierce.
And why did you feel that those 10 people needed to hear that Mr. Castleton was stunned?
I was just recording the report as had been provided to me by external agents.
The next point is, he did not apply for leave to appeal against the decision. That was a piece of good news, wasn't it?
Yes, because it meant, as far as Post Office Limited was concerned, that that was the end of the matter.
And he had been told that he would need to lodge some £50,000 in order to appeal, hadn't he?
That I cannot recall. I believe that that may have had something to do with
security for costs, yes?
Security for costs, that's correct.
Exactly. So this was good news, and it seems from the way that you've written this email that you expected your audience of 10, your readership of 10, to be pleased to hear that he was stunned, that he was completely overcome, that he was unable to appeal, and that was that.
I think they were more interested in the fact that we had brought the case to a satisfactory conclusion as far as Poll was concerned. That last paragraph is just me reporting verbatim from a report which I received from Bond Pierce.
Yes. You reported that he was overpowered, utterly defeated, and that was what Poll wanted, wasn't it?
No, that was not Poll's objective.
It was part of a culture at Poll.
Absolutely.
Those who stood up to the institution must be utterly overcome and defeated.
Absolutely not.
Your task was effectively, metaphorically, to put Mr. Castleton's head on a spike, and you did that, didn't you?
Absolutely not.
And it was somebody's idea, not yours, wasn't it? Somebody in Poll came up with that idea, did they not?
No. This began as a small, relatively small, deficiency case. It expanded out of all proportion because of the size of the counterclaim, and then became a virtual and then actual test case due to the allegation that there were substantial defects with the Horizon system.
Do you still maintain that this case was about the counterclaim by this point?
It was about the counterclaim up until the time the counterclaim was reduced to the level of about £11,000 or so. Thereafter, it was indeed about the desire on the part of Poll to have a substantial judgment dealing with allegations about the Horizon system.
That's what you delivered for them, wasn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Christine?
Mrs. Talbot.
Oh, sorry.
My name is Sam Steen. I represent a very large number of sub-postmasters and mistresses. You've mentioned in your evidence, and I just read out a little bit of what you've been saying this morning. You said, I think at about 11:35, you believed that the Post Office felt the need to demonstrate that it would take a firm line with any challenges to Horizon. And then you've answered a number of questions from Mr. Blake and then more recently on the question of whether you have any evidence that you can tell us about where that direction came from, that firm line. Again, you said this earlier, no idea where that direction would have come from. Now, Mrs. Talbot, you don't come across, if I may say so, as someone that seems to be having any problems with your memory. So, the large number of people that I represent are finding it very hard to believe that you cannot recall where you got this direction from. Is it your evidence that you simply can't remember who told you what the Poll line was? Is that actually your evidence?
The line would have come from Poll as an organisation. There were many different managers in that organisation, and I was given instructions by many people during the course of litigation. Can I put my hand on my heart and come up with the name of a person? I'm afraid I can't. I wish I could for the sub-postmasters who you represent.
Okay. So no one single name comes to your recollection? Not one? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Can I take you to your statement, please, which you should have there?
Yes.
And is WITN 08 500 100. And if we can have on screen paragraph 7, which is page 2. If you can scroll down to paragraph 7, I'll be very grateful. Right. Now, here we have you saying that by 2004, I was a team leader of the postal litigation team within the civil litigation department. At no time did the team work predominantly for the Post Office Limited or on cases involving sub-postmasters. That was a small proportion of the work. And then you go on to say in the next sentence that the postal litigation team ceased to exist and was absorbed into the dispute resolution department, which was the new name of the civil litigation department. Now, let's concentrate on the next couple of sentences. There was no formal structure for upward report within the department, although my line managers operated an open door policy. We were never provided with guidance on what issues should be reported. Okay. So let's see if you can help us understand the way this works.
Sure.
You're saying clearly in your statement that there was no formal structure reporting upwards.
Correct.
Right. But you're also saying in your evidence that there was a structure for you getting the line or the policy from Pol in relation to sub-postmasters. You said repeatedly, as you did to me a few minutes ago, that Pol made it clear what their attitude was towards issues with the Horizon system. So are you saying in your statement, no upwards policy or guidance system, but there certainly was a downwards one?
My paragraph 7 describes the position purely within the civil litigation department. There was neither a formal upwards escalation for seeking guidance, neither was there a downwards sequence of guidance from the solicitor down to caseworkers. What you're describing, I believe, is on the Post Office Limited side of affairs. And during the duration of the Castleton litigation, the identity of the parties that you've seen in the correspondence to whom I was reporting backwards, in effect developed. Day one, Castleton legislation, there was merely Ms. Woodward from the error resolution team at Chesterfield.
I see. Well, let's then turn to the last part of that paragraph, paragraph 7, page 3 of your statement. Let's go through the people that we have here. Mm-hmm. Now, see if this helps you. So, we've reached the end of the sentence. We were never provided with guidance on what issues should be reported. And then you go on to say, my first line manager in the civil litigation department was Joe Ashton. Okay. Now, let's just go through these people and see if you can help.
Sure.
Did you get the steer about the post office and its line towards people doubting the Horizon system through your line manager, first of all, Joe Ashton?
No.
Right. Claire Wardle,
no.
Same question. No?
No.
Right. Biddy Wiles?
No.
Right. Rebecca Mantle?
No.
Right. So you are saying very clearly none of those individuals provided you the poll line. Is that right?
Well, they couldn't because they were members of the civil litigation department.
Were they your managers?
Each and every one of them was my manager.
Right. So
sequentially.
Right. So these individuals, which were your managers, sequentially over the period of time when you were dealing with litigation, none of those provided you with the poll line you've been asked many questions about.
No.
So it didn't come through them.
No.
And you remember very clearly it didn't come through them.
They were my colleagues who I worked with on a daily basis.
Do you remember, as clearly as the rest of your evidence, that this poll line didn't come through them? Is that what you're saying?
I genuinely do not believe it came from them.
Right. So, eliminating those, as far as we can, it's come from some other source. Is that correct?
That would be logical, yes.
Okay. Now, can I take you then, please, to how things developed in relation to 2010. I'll take you to the document which is the Isme report. It's been called generally a whitewash report. And that's POL 000 26572. Very grateful. And if we can just enlarge the top, thank you. Now, you described yourself in your evidence as being a conduit. Our understanding of what you're trying to say there is you're a conduit for the wishes of the post office. Yes?
Correct.
I assume you're not trying to portray yourself as some sort of evil robot.
Absolutely
No.
not.
Okay. So you're a conduit for the for the post office's intentions and wishes in relation to the way that matters are dealt with regarding Horizon. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think what I said was by 2010, I was performing some conduit actions in respect of information about the Misra case and relaying that back to Mike Granville and Rod Isme.
Okay. Let's have a look at the heading of this particular part of what becomes the Isme report. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously under the word confidential, it's got to it's going to Dave Smith, Managing Director. It's from Rod Isme, and then the other people that are referred to here. Now, we see yourself referred to, Mandy Talbot, Principal Lawyer, Civil. Yes? Mm-hmm. Was that a title you gave yourself?
No, it was a title that emerged.
Yes, because it's Mandy Talbot, Principal Lawyer, Civil, which is distinguishing itself from Rob Wilson, Head of Criminal Law.
Yes.
So it appears, as far as we can tell in this document, that you are being portrayed as the principal lawyer in the civil department.
That is incorrect. Well, that is incorrect.
Your boss at this time was that...
Rebecca Mansell.
Rebecca Mantle,
at
yes.
this time.
She's not on this email, is she?
No.
No. Can you help with why it is that she would be not referred to within this email chain?
I'm afraid I can't.
Because the report that follows, the Isme report, is a report that looks at the question of whether there should be a review or investigation into the Horizon system. Why isn't your boss involved in that?
I didn't create the report. I cannot give you any information about the distribution list.
You see, this suggests, as does other evidence that you've gone through with Mr. Blake, who asked you questions first of all, that in fact you're taking a principal lawyer role in relation to Horizon errors, issues. It's correct, isn't it?
No, it's not. That is merely a title that was attached to my name. You will see me referred to as Mandy Talbot, Principal Lawyer, without the civil in brackets, in some internal correspondence, in the same way that Royal Mail Group at one time became Consignia. It was quite open to changing titles.
Mr. Talbot, you've made reference a couple of times in your evidence to the limitations on the disclosed material you've seen. You've commented on it being partial. You've commented on the fact that if only you had access to your own files, electronic files and electronic data. Mr. Talbot, are you trying to say that somewhere within all this missing material that might be a document that would portray you in a more sympathetic light? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I think the documentation that has been disclosed portrays me in an accurate light.
Well, Mrs. Talbot, I think there my clients would agree. Thank you.
Mrs. Talbot, when you use the word partial in relation to disclosure, do I understand that to mean incomplete as opposed to selectively left out?
I think I used the word partial only in respect of the initial report created by Mr. Coyne.
Well, I may have misunderstood that, so let me be clear about it. Let me try and get to it in this way. When you either sought instructions about a course of action, where you felt the need to seek instructions either from your line managers or from some other department within the post office, did you generally seek those instructions in writing or orally?
It would have been a combination of both.
Well, that I'm prepared to consider to be quite likely, at the very least. So one can take it that in respect of some of the things you've been asked about, where you've been unable to identify personnel, there ought to be at least some written exchanges between you and that person about whatever it was that you were then seeking instructions and receiving instructions.
Undoubtedly, that's correct.
And so far as you are concerned, at least, you haven't been shown any of that documentation. Do I understand you correctly on that?
That is correct, though I did have to assimilate a large amount of material on Tuesday of last week. But to the best of my knowledge, no.
So that, for example, and I'm just using this as an example, when the strategy in Mr. Castleton's case was being discussed between Mr. Dilly and you, can I take it that at least on occasions you would have escalated what was being discussed either to your line managers or to some other department before giving Mr. Dilly an answer
Absolutely.
as to the strategy to be followed?
Absolutely, both internally up the line within civil litigation and across to Paul the business.
Yeah, and just so that, because as you know, I am inquiring, so I'd like, if I could, to understand who it was that would have been giving you instructions, in the sense of knowing who that person was. All right. So I understand that you've said you can't remember, and I'm not going to probe that any further. But can you at least say, apart from your line managers, what other departments might you have sought instructions from? In other words, commercial, security, I'm just naming them at random, but can you tell me the likelihood of the departments you would have sought instructions from?
The answer I can give categorically is the error resolution team at Chesterfield.
Right, so that's a department that I might want to investigate. That's number one. Number two, if any?
That is the one I can be absolutely certain about, because they were the parties that sent it out for litigation in the first place.
Yeah, but don't worry about being certain about it. In an inquiry, you might say, well, I think I might have done this, and then it's up to me to decide whether I follow it up. Yeah. Do you see what I mean?
Indeed.
So if there are other departments that you think it at least likely that you may have sought instructions from, I'd be grateful if you'd name them.
I sought assistance from a lot of departments like security, information from Fujitsu.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
When you say you sought information from Fujitsu, did you do that directly in the sense that you had a contact in Fujitsu that you could contact directly, or did you have to go through some other process?
There were some people eventually, as the litigation progressed, But initially, an awful lot of that material was sought by Mr. Stephen Dilly as a consequence of his letter addressed to Fujitsu. And then people started responding to that, sometimes copying me into those responses, ultimately with the material being sent to Stephen. I really wish I could pin it down to a department or even some persons. Undoubtedly, Dave Smith was one of the most senior people within Pol, who was fairly regularly copied into the emails. Indeed, he is often first on the list on a number of those early emails. And I think he was possibly managing director of one of the Pol departments at the time.
Well, unless I'm wrong about it, there were two Mr. David Smiths in post office in the relevant period.
David
But-
X. Smith, I believe. Oh, pardon,
Yes.
sir. David
no,
X.
one of them
Smith
was
is the
certainly.
person.
Yeah, I follow. All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Diolch.
So all that remains is for me to thank you for making a witness statement and for coming to the inquiry to answer a good many questions during the course of the day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Thank you.